Have you ever been hit with the feeling where time just stops while making the most difficult decision of your life? I have. It was the most pressurizing, stressful, and scariest situation I ever had to make, but I somehow managed to make the right choice. A very narrow escape. First things first. I'm a prison security officer working at a very dark but highly facilitated prison in Detroit. I'd have to say, half of hell's spawn dwell here. The worst criminals you could ever imagine all decided to converge into one place. That place just so happened to be here. Let me tell you, this place is the most fucked up crime hole you could ever imagine. Think of a place with barely any rules inhabited by unruly citizens. This is it. It turns you into a person you never thought you'd be. Your mind becomes easily desensitized and corrupt over the course of a month or so. The least worst crime somebody had committed here was probably aggravated assault, on multiple accounts. Oftentimes, me and other guards would try to find somebody who had the lightest charge or charges on them when we got bored. That was if there were no child molesters to beat the shit out of for fun. Prison fights are a daily basis. Riots used to be monthly rituals. Many of us used to wonder how the hell we survived for this long before we upgraded and became so uptight. We are authorized to fire upon anyone who causes misconduct. We try everything we can to keep things in order before we have to fire a shot. It really messes with your head. Makes you forget proper ethics and reason. I've seen guards shoot prisoners just because they didn't like them. The cells get darker and colder the deeper you get into the facility. Some of them make you wonder if they are even supposed to be a whole cell. We sometimes travel there since the prison fills up pretty quickly while the older ones take leave. The deepest halls had an ambiance of dreadful darkness. The occasional rat squeal could be heard. The stereotypical moisture of dropping sounds were present. You could sometimes hear the prisoners screaming and pitching a fit while losing their sanity. Just the feeling of the hall gave you the creeps. It was cold and able to send chills down your body no matter how many times you've been down here. There was, however, one strange room that we noticed at the end of the halls. It was found in the depths of the cell block. It seemed to have an old steel bar for a handle. It had 4 strange looking locks. There was a very faded square of what used to be a sign. I never knew what it once said, neither did the other guards. The only letters I could make out were OOR at the bottom right corner. Nobody that we knew had ever been in those doors except the very few highest ranking officials. Some of us had questioned the door. They were all told the same thing. That's classified. A rumor leaked that dead bodies made into a tomb were settled there, but it wasn't solid enough for most of us to believe it. We all just knew something wasn't right about that room. Today, a major prison riot broke out. Who knows who started it? It all seemed so planned out, so cleverly timed. 3 guards were killed instantly with a giant mob of orange suits tagging everyone in sight. Some had small, almost useless weapons, which escalated into bigger and much more dangerous weapons. The guards' batons were taken and used to bash doors with their head. A few of them somehow salvaged some firearms and were using them against us. The guards in the more populated rooms had no chance. There were many groups wandering around, either trying to let out other prisoners or find emergency gun cache. It was hidden very well in the facility, but it wouldn't go undiscovered for long. It could eventually be found, especially with the determination of the prisoners. I ran into one of the top secret rooms which was open but deserted. I reached into an open drawer hidden under a desk in the corner of the room. There was a key. It wasn't like any key I've ever seen. It was shaped like a skeleton key, except the studs were shaped in strange thunderbolt-like patterns. There was a note next to it that said, "Warning, authorized use only for this key or lethal force will be used." I somehow instantly knew what it was for. So I ran towards the depths of the jail, while dodging incoming prisoner blows. I managed to throw a deadly nose break to one of them and slammed another. I don't remember how I got there. I must have blacked out from the fights. As I stood at the end of the long wholesale hall, I felt a strange, suspenseful dread coursing throughout my body. The closer I neared the door titled OOR, the more nervous I felt. I quivered, probably from the coldness of the cell and the slightest fear that was bothering me. The dripping of moisture must have been the loudest sound I had ever heard at the time. I felt lightheaded, wondering what I was about to experience. However, I did not have much time. Whether I was going to hide in the room or bunker in for safety, I needed to get in. So I placed the key into the locks. It required effort to awkwardly twist the key. Each one had a loud breaking sound when they were unlocked. I paused. I felt very uncomfortable. I knew it had to be done. I grabbed the metal handle and pulled. It didn't budge. It required a lot more effort to be opened. It scraped against the ground and slowly creaked its way open. Steel grinding against the tough floor, it produced an eerie, echoing, creaking sound. I went inside and closed the door until there was only a crack. It was dark, pitch dark, even though I could barely see the crack from the door. All I saw was black. The room seemed to be spacey enough to spread out your arms without touching the walls. I felt for a switch, lever, something to produce even just a little light. I felt a string that seemed attached to something above me. I pulled on it. An old-fashioned metal hanging light shone from above. There, in front of me, was a steel cylinder. It was not only locked with a safe wheel and 4 other strange-looking locks, but it was bolted shut, like it was never meant to be opened. Then, the answer to all my curiosity to what was in the room came upon when I saw a metal peephole. It was locked. It was placed about 3 feet above my head. I am 6 feet and 1. The cylinder towered over me. My height only reached half that of the cylinder. I found a key laying out on the steel drawer nearby that I didn't notice due to the dark display I had been fantasizing about for a long time. I placed the key into the peephole lock to see if it would work. To my surprise, it fit perfectly. I took off the lock and I took a deep breath. This is it. No turning back. I slowly slid the peephole open. I felt like I couldn't move any part of my body besides my hands. Immediately I saw 2 dim scarred eyelids inside. Both eyes were not only scarred, but had a clear previously cut gash down the middle. I froze for a second. But then after a bit, I said, "Hello?" The eyes opened swiftly without warning. These eyes were unlike anything I've ever seen. One was discolored and white, as if it were a blind eye. The other was red, blood red. He responded with a very deep voice that came from his belly. "Yes," said a very deep, booming, raspy voice full of despair and hate, the air filled with the sound of his speech. "Hello?" I stuttered. I was too scared to even move. Not only the eyes were scarring to look all at, but the feeling of dread was upon me. "You await me for what reason?" He sounded quite angry. "I honestly don't know. The prisoners, they all just revolted. They overpowered us and this is the only place I could go." "The inevitable deaths have come upon you. You only have one choice. The power and creepy feeling of his voice was enough to make you tremble in fear. No amount of steel could protect you from this type of fear. Who are you? 959 was all he said. Why do they keep you locked up in this chamber, if I must ask? Behind you. At this point I was shocked and scared shitless. I was certain that there was actually someone behind me ready to kill me with their bare hands. I turned. There was a metal cabinet nearby. I walked over to it. Noticing that my feet were shaking, I opened it. Inside were many files. Open, said prisoner 959. The bellow of his voice startled me. I opened one file named Crime Scene Photos. Instantly, I was disgusted and grew sick to my stomach. One of the pages read 12 victims in squatter home cellar. Next to it was a picture of bodies impaled through the mouth and out of the coccyx. They were upside down, stripped, bloodied, and bearing almost no layers of skin. Their mouths were stretched wide open and their jaws unhinged so that the poles which impaled them could fit. Some of them had absolutely no teeth, but bloody gums squeezing out the poles. Their eyes were rolled back into their heads, and some of them were facing directly at the camera. The bloodshot whites of their eyes displayed the pain and agony they must have gone through. Behind them, there was a message written in blood on the cellar concrete walls, reading, "Penance." I had never seen such a revolting picture in my life. You did all this? I trembled. They deserved it, quietly replied the prisoner. I looked deeper and it showed the picture of a cell from the prison. There was so much gore in the cells. I remembered overhearing about this incident from prisoners, but didn't know if it was actually true. There lay two of what seemed like dead inmates on the ground, and one was nailed to the wall with a long metal piece from the bed. They were so terribly mangled that they couldn't have been recognized as human. Oh my God. This actually happened? It's true? Yes, quietly said the voice. I looked at the other files, attempting to look for information on the sick fuck. I read that his real name was unknown, but his infamous alias seemed to be Karn. His guessed age was 30. He was a massive hulking 7 feet 1, weighing at 204 pounds. I couldn't believe it. Taking on someone of his magnitude was impossible without enough firepower. His early life is completely unknown. He has 103 confirmed murders, although he potentially has claimed to 170. Skipping along his biography, he apparently has killed many known criminals. He had killed 2 cops. He was caught in the act of flaying a fully conscious man alive after people heard the overwhelming screams from nearby, and it took 6 tasers to take him down. Survived 2 shotgun shells to the side and the stomach. All the victims and crimes were kept confidential to keep the public from fearing the streets. Now I can see why this man or thing is kept in a secret room with a very secure chamber. Why? Why did you do this? I yelled in disbelief. They deserve to die. They deserve to suffer. They deserve to rot, he said. Why did they deserve to die? I was on the verge of insanity from what I had seen. They inflicted others with pain. They must suffer penance. I had to think fast. The prisoners are closing in fast. There is no chance of hiding back here for long. There are still rotting prisoners here. My gun won't protect me against all of them. My hand-to-hand skills are good, but I can't go on forever. I have myself cornered. Here and there, I can faintly hear a gunshot fire outside. The last possible choice I could have is to release the prisoner. I could only hope he killed only those who deserved it, though not in the methods that he did. If he would help me, it could be my only chance to get out alive. If I help you out of there, Will you help me? No. I will help the ones who could be victimized by these heaps of meat. Does that include me? I was praying at this point for a miracle. Yes. I quickly grabbed a strange-looking tool from the cabinet. It seemed like it would take out the bolts from the door. I took out the bolts. They clanged on the door. I then carefully unlocked the locks one by one, very slowly but carefully, hearing nothing but the sound of the key jiggling to the pins. Then came the final step, the safe wheel. It looked very threatening and uninviting, but I had no choice. I turned it multiple times, using all my might, thinking it would never open. Suddenly, a very loud piercing clang noise echoed throughout the room. It scared me and made me fall back. I watched as the door slowly opened, producing a loud creaking. Inside, there the prisoner stood, just as his file described. He was a giant, wearing ragged old orange clothes, greased up to the point where it was almost gray. He was a mess. His face was terribly scarred. Not a single patch of skin on his face was smooth. His malicious eyes stared back at me, one of them white, one of them red. They stared at me from behind the mask, which covered his nose and mouth. It had straps that wrapped around the back of his head. It seemed to have parts that went into his mouth. Instantly, I referenced it to Hannibal Lecter. The mask was probably to keep him from biting. His scars left you speechless with fear. He had very long black hair, which went down to the waist. There were chains around his limbs. The inside of the steel door had a couple of dents that were well made for a human being. I thought to myself, how could I unchain him without freaking the hell out? But just then, he fucking broke the chains off right out of the chamber. Just like that. A human being ripping the chains out from the chamber with ease. He stepped out of the chamber. His boots produced a loud thump you could feel on the ground. He towered over my head. He came up to me, staring at me in both eyes, into my soul, and past it. He was extremely enraged. I felt so frightened I just couldn't move. I was shivering throughout my whole body. I wouldn't dare budge or twitch. He put his hands forward. I thought he was going to wring my neck, but he didn't. He was showing his handcuffs so I could unlock them. I did so for him, then slowly sidestepped out of the way. He just kept staring at me with a look as if he wanted nothing more to gouge my eyes out. But he slowly turned and went on his way. He opened the door with almost no effort and thumbed down the cell block hall. I watched him as he made his way down. All of a sudden, 2 prisoners arrived around the corner and darted down the block. That proved to be the biggest and last mistake of their lives. Immediately they saw Connor and just froze, but worse than I ever did. They must have known about the incident in the cell. They were too shocked to budge. Their eyes widened. Unexpectedly, the giant drew back his hands and backhanded his fist into the side of the prisoner's head. His head smacked off on the door of one of the whole cells and drew blood all over his face. 959 grabbed the second prisoner's face and smashed the back of his head against the other side where the wall was. Instantly, brain matter, blood, and pieces of blood blotched everywhere, making a gory mess on the wall and floor. I was speechless. I couldn't say or do anything at this point. 959 killed 2 men with little effort. By the time I collected myself and regained what was left of my sanity, a few minutes later, I started down the hall, towards the direction that 959 went. It wasn't long before the commotion in the prison went from angry riots to blood-curdling screams, cries for help, pleas of mercy, and groans of agony. I saw the remains of prisoners scattered all around. As the halls and rooms grew smaller, all I could see were bloody fragments covering orange clothing. Some were impaled on bars in the same fashion as before, which were made from a ripped-off cell door. Gunshots fired, but it seemed to do nothing while the screams. I ran towards the path of dismembered limbs and corpses. Not a single life was spared. No quarter, no warning, no mercy. Every prisoner was grotesquely murdered in cold blood. One of them was hung up over a railing by an orange pair of pants. The only bodies that weren't mangled as badly as the orange suits were the guards. Most of their corpses were intact. The ones that were still alive were scared shitless. Maybe they were saved. When I caught up to 959, I could see him stomp on a prisoner's head, squashing it like a grape. He was pulling a prisoner off a guard by his neck. He picked him up and slammed him against the wall and squeezed until his neck made a loud cracking sound. He was killed instantly. Another inmate attempted to rush at 959 with the butt of a shotgun. He rammed it into his back, but it barely even budged him. In response, prisoner 959 turned around and grabbed the gun. The inmate tries to punch him in the face, but he blocked it with his giant right hand, grabbing it and struck the elbow with his left hand, dislocating it. The inmate screamed in pain. 959 then proceeded to bludgeon him to a shattered boneless pulp with the shotgun until it was. He then shot the barrel into the inmate. A hiding prisoner attempted to grab me from behind. I turned, elbowing him in the face twice, and bent over to grab his right leg. I rolled forward and pulled back as hard as I could, dislocating his limb. There was no chance of him getting up. However, Karn didn't think the same thing. He grabbed the prisoner's intact left leg, straightened it, and crunched it into his body. The prisoner screamed in pain and agony from shock. 959 walked on like it never happened. Me and the other guards were able to get as situated as we could once the SWAT team arrived. However, once they made it, 959 was long gone. Prisoner 959 has never been heard of ever since. He had disappeared without a trace. He left no signs of leave after the bloodbath of a jail. Investigators and authorities have searched up and down the city, inside and out. Eyes were kept open for more gruesome reports. They have found nothing. I can honestly see why they have sought him tirelessly. He could be anywhere, doing anything to anybody.